All right, well, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us for the September Lunch and Learn. I know we're still waiting for a couple people to join, but we are going to be recording this like we do all of our Lunch and Learns and posting it to our YouTube. So I'll send out a link to everybody who registered in the next day, either by today or Monday. You can look for that recording. Everyone who's joining, just go ahead and put your name and organization if you'd like in the chat to introduce yourself. But I'm excited to have Sam and Dan presenting again. I think you guys presented last fall, towards the end of last fall. So we're looking forward to any updated information from you. So I'm gonna just do a quick 10 minutes or less update on the 2030. I have a few new things to share. But for those who aren't familiar, we are part of a network of 24 districts across the US and in Canada. We are the third largest. We're very close to becoming the second largest. So we have 59 million square feet of building space that are in our program currently, which is very exciting. Also exciting is that Michigan has 3 districts. We do have Ann Arbor, Detroit, and Grand Rapids. So we often partner with them and work together on several things. What is the district trying to do? So that's the entire district network, as well as the Detroit 2030 district. Our goal is to reduce carbon emissions in the city from energy, transportation, and water from our buildings and transportation. So we do that first by helping our buildings understand what their baseline is, what their current usage looks like. And we do that by tracking energy and water data in Energy Star Portfolio Manager. Last year, we hosted the 2030 Network Summit, which is held every year. It's an opportunity for all of the districts to get together. And so Connie, after 3 years of planning during COVID, finally was able to host. It was a really great event. We brought together the 2030 districts from all over the country. And during that time, there were some discussions about, well, 2030 is coming soon. So what does that mean for us as a network? And so the network did adopt a new goal. So accelerating to zero beyond 2030. And the new goal is to provide critical leadership and resources to reduce emissions in the entire built environment by 50 to 65% by 2030 and reach zero emissions by 2040. So when we talk about zero emissions and what that looks like and how to accelerate, we're talking about energy efficiency, we're talking about electrification, we're talking about clean grids, reduced embodied emissions, and advocating for updating our building codes and other policies and incentives to help move these projects forward. So we do have 3 different types of membership. We have our building members. Those are the property owners and managers in Detroit, and they can currently sign up buildings at no cost. And we support them on some of their benchmarking, if there's a pilot program or any opportunities that we can help meet them with where they're at in their journey to reduce their energy, water, and overall carbon emissions from their buildings. We also have professional stakeholders like Sam and Dan who support us financially in this work. And we also have community stakeholders, which are other nonprofit organizations that are doing work in Detroit that we partner with. So we are very thankful for all of our professional stakeholders and all of our members, in fact. So I already mentioned we have 59 million square feet. So that's about 460 buildings. That number may be slightly increased since this slide was updated, but we have over 40 professional stakeholders that support us, and 7 of those are statewide stakeholders. So they are supporting both Detroit, Ann Arbor, and Grand Rapids, so all 3 of the Michigan 2030 districts. And then we have over 40 community stakeholders as well. These are our board members. So I'm sure often some of our board members join these lunch and learns. So, and I didn't see who joined, so maybe you're on there, but I'm sure you recognize some of these faces. So very thankful for all of our board. We have a very active board. And we also have 3 best practices groups. Now these groups meet more like quarterly. Connie has done most of the work with the best practice groups, but this is where she started to organize building types. So we have multifamily houses of worship and a venue museum group, which is now just venues because the museum group actually turned into a national group, which is really exciting. So these groups meet quarterly. And through the houses of worship best practice group, we also, Connie started a house of worship treasure hunt competition. We've now had 2 cohorts of houses of worship that have gone through the program. So this is our 2nd cohort. This was taken earlier this year. We also had several volunteers, including Bob Bedzik on the call. And again, I can't see all the faces that are on there, but several volunteers who also helped the houses of worship through this program. So we're hoping to continue this in the future. Another big thing that we've started doing is the Detroit Energy Challenge that was kind of put on hold after it launched in February of 2020. So we've brought that back. We've held it for 2 years now. This year, it's always held in June. We have an annual awards breakfast. And this is in partnership with the City of Detroit and the Michigan Battle of the Buildings. And so we are awarding Detroit's biggest losers, those buildings that are reducing their energy consumption the most from the previous year. So next year, and you'll look for updates coming out from me and reminders. And if you need any support, reach out to us. But your data from 2023 needs to be complete and entered into Energy Star Portfolio Manager by March 13th of next year. So we will be sending out a lot of communications about this. If your building had a great reduction in energy from 2022 to 2023, there's a good chance that you will be recognized. And if you sign up for the Detroit Energy Challenge, you're automatically enrolled in the Michigan Battle of the Buildings and vice versa. So you may have an opportunity to be awarded at the state level as well as the local level. I have a little save the date, the bottom right corner. We'll also be getting more information out about this, but it is the 10th anniversary of the Michigan Energy Summit where they award Michigan Battle of the Buildings awardees. And that is going to be May 15th of next year in Grand Rapids. So save the date and look for some more communications from us. Just a quick slide here, a little update. We have partnered with Green Living Science recently on a grant to expand recycling in 1,000 multifamily buildings in Detroit. So we're going to be holding an event, and it's primarily focused for multifamily buildings, but Green Living Science is working in general with the City of Detroit to expand commercial and multifamily recycling. So if you are interested in learning about recycling for any commercial or multifamily building in the city, feel free to join us. When I'm done with my slides, I'll drop a link to this event. So it's going to be October 12th. It's going to be at the Beach Club Apartments, which was our first place winner in the first Detroit Energy Challenge Awards. It will include a tour of the building. It will include lunch, a tour of the buildings, the property where the geothermal system was installed. So the developer will be able to answer questions and provide a tour for everyone who's interested. And then we'll also have the Detroit Recycles team there to give a brief presentation and answer any questions you may have about recycling. So just wanted to say thank you again to our platinum stakeholders that support us. I heard the Lions won yesterday. I think I heard that on the radio. I was not watching the game. And then thank you to our funding partners, Eagle and GM, and to all of our professional stakeholders that support the work that the Detroit 2030 district does. And then lastly, if you're interested in participating, you can always become a member. So you can become a building member, a professional stakeholder, community stakeholder. We also have a couple events throughout the year. So there are event sponsorship opportunities, or if you're interested in volunteering. And then you can always follow us on Twitter, LinkedIn, and Facebook. So those are all the slides I have. So now I'm gonna turn it over. I'm gonna stop sharing and I'm gonna turn it over to Dan Henderson, and he's gonna bring up his slides here.
Let's see here. If you could be so kind and let me know when you can see my screen, Kendall.
Well, I can see it. Looks good.
All
Thank you.
right. Yes, thank you, Kendall, and thank you, Detroit 2030 District stakeholders. I appreciate the opportunity to present and spend some time together this afternoon. And got to say, it's really encouraging looking at some of the information that Kendall just shared to see the positive momentum that the Detroit 2030 District has. It's really encouraging to see what a group of forward-thinking individuals can accomplish and will continue to accomplish. So, again, very excited to be here today. What we're going to talk about is solar PV, a multi-value stream asset. We're going to kind of, poke into the many reasons why commercial customers are buying solar and ultimately the many ways it can present that value. So so a little bit about us. Who is Michigan Solar Solutions? We've been in business since 2007, so we're on our 16th year in business, and we've installed over 14 megawatts of solar, which is right around north of 36,000 solar panels installed to date. We typically are a turnkey process, and everything from engineering, procurement, construction, right through to commissioning. We do offer a la carte options, as sometimes that is more desired, but most of our business, I would say, would be a turnkey installation. And then we are known as what is a behind the meter installer. And what that simply refers to is we interface with the meter on the customer's side for direct consumption on site, or I should say majority of that direct consumption on site. For our first, I'd say 10 plus years of being in business, it was a residential company who did some commercial. But as of late, we've really started to shift our organization. And to date, we're probably about a 50% commercial installation company with that to continue to kind of eclipse the business. So how does solar work? This is something I always like to share just to kind of give a brief overview of what is distributed generation or modified net metering. So in this example here, we have some solar panels on the residential home. And as the sun's shining, we're going to collect those photons or that sunlight and convert it over to usable energy through the means of an inverter. It takes the direct current or DC power and converts it over to alternating current or AC power so we can safely consume in the home or, in this case, the building. So it will feed and tie into the main distribution panel or meter depending on interconnection. And from that point, when power is produced, I always kind of like to joke that electricity is lazy. It's looking for the least path of resistance. So in this scenario, it's what loads or consumption are currently being consumed on site that it can satisfy and negate. In the instance where there's more power produced than consuming, maybe the business is closed on July 4th, but we know we're going to produce nicely in those months. We would actually see that excess generation that the building doesn't need at that time be sold off to the utility, which would ultimately be transmitted to the nearby business or nearby meter. So your part in, installing solar PV actually does kind of help alleviate the grid demand some and push clean energy back onto the grid for others to consume, those immediate neighbors. So let's get into the value streams. The first and foremost is going to be the most, the one that really drives most individuals into our arena or in those conversations. It would be the electric bill savings. It's one of the larger items on the balance sheet. And unlike when you pay people, they make you money. So that's an expense we're willing to pay. But this is a larger item on the balance sheet that unfortunately continuously grows. Regardless of what rate schedule or tariff you're on, the electricity is quite simply just too expensive. And the reliability is also decreasing in the interim. So this is just a great way to de-risk your future electric purchases and essentially lock in a proportion of your electricity consumption at a fixed rate for the next 30 plus years. It's a fantastic way to incubate your business and potentially give you a competitive advantage as you incubate yourself. Value stream number 2 is going to be marketing. And this one I think is a really powerful quote from our founder, Mark Haggerty. And I know of no other marketing expense other than a solar array that even if the marketing message fell flat, the campaign would still return a profit. This is a really powerful message. In this day and age where we see that the growing interests around sustainability, renewable energy, there's a marketing message for just about every industry out there. I had a recent interaction with they own a large brewer up in the Mount Pleasant area who happens to be a college town. And when we got into the marketing conversations, they took a really cool spin on it that just stuck out to me. And their thought was, why don't we try and become the greenest green beer on St. Patrick's Day and send that message to those college students who really take an interest in sustainability? I think there is a plethora of opportunities here to market these PV arrays and really should be looked at very heavily. The other is going to be, and this is number 3, is going to be compliance. And this could be a number of things: corporate, sustainability or ESG goals, supply chain, accreditation. There is a lot of things that this caveat could fall under here. But one I think is really important is going to be the, staying compliant with large partners. So, it's no mystery that any automotive, distributor or provider, they're going to be pushing for sustainability goals to keep those OE partners happy. But we've seen that this is really compounded and it's gone outside just the automotive industry. These days, we're starting now to see that things like Walmart, they have Project Gigaton where they're wanting to have all of their suppliers reduce their carbon footprints. I've heard of companies like Kellogg's making a push for it. So now the word on this, what we're seeing here, observing in the market is, if we don't do some sort of sustainability measures in renewables, we may not lose that partnership with the large, Kellogg's or the Walmarts out there. But what may happen is we could put ourselves at risk that we will not be awarded new contracts and new business with those potential suppliers or large customer base. So this is a great way, solar is a low-hanging fruit for reducing those carbon emissions reduction goals. Value stream number 4, this one's always exciting, is going to be a property value increase. So much more data has been observed on the residential side, where Zillow found that a typical residential home experienced about a 4.1% increase in its value nationwide. There are certain areas and states that aren't as mature in the solar PV market. California is much more mature than in New York or Michigan, so we see that those do fluctuate some. But what we've seen across the country is it's a quicker sale of the home or business. And the reason being is it's quite simple. Now there's sustainability. There is the ability to produce my own power on site. It's going to cost me far less to operate my business in that building or even live in that home. And then because of the property value increase, this system could potentially be subject to property tax increase. Although Governor Whitmer had signed into law that any system that is category 2 or below, which is 150 kilowatt AC or below, is property tax exempt. So that is where we see bulk of our commercial customers. They play within that 150 kilowatt AC to maximize the savings and not have that property tax increase. Do we build systems larger than that? Absolutely. Typically, that results in a little bit more granular look in the system, what potential savings we could drive from that, and also looking at things like the millage rates to determine what potential property tax could increase look like for that site. Number 5, and this one I'm really excited about, and this is going to be the incentives. These we've seen after that climate legislation last year, we have seen exponential growth in interest because of that. So first off, it reinstated the climate legislation reinstated the 30% investment tax credit. It was slated to be 22% and declined down to 10% and stay there. So this was a fantastic win because we have some lofty carbon neutrality goals as a country that we need to achieve, and solar is going to be a large portion of that adoption. But it's also an opportunity to increase that investment tax credit from that 30% base. There are additional adders. One is an energy community, which is an area that has been historically dependent on employment or tax revenues from fossil fuels industry. And then there's things like domestic content for sourcing equipment that has been manufactured here in the United States. We can start to value stack some of these incentives and really drive a unbelievable financial performance. In fact, I'm really excited to show you the case study here in a moment of one that we were able to really stack in these incentives. And then there's also going to be a state level depreciation and a federal level depreciation that follows a typical 5-year depreciation schedule. And value number 6 is going to be everything else. I think there is a tremendous amount that we are just starting to scrape the surface on. Environmental emission reduction, employee satisfaction, which we did touch a little bit on the millennials. They're in our workforce now, and that coming age group where, hey, they take this seriously, sustainability and the future of our planet. But what I've also seen in the employee satisfaction and retention is, again, more unique ways to use this to a business's advantage. I'm working with one company who, when I asked what their interest was or their motivations into exploring solar, and it was because they don't have air conditioning in their warehouse, and it would cost quite a bit. It'd be a significant investment, not just on the infrastructure, but the monthly ongoing investment. So their thought process was, if we install solar PV and we can lock in a lower rate and we can incubate ourselves, now we can afford the air conditioning because it'll be fueled by solar PV. And as a direct result, I'll now have an air conditioned warehouse, which is going to allow me to attract and retain new employees. I think there is so many applications out there that we're just starting to scratch the surface on. And then, of course, there's always going to be site-specific or industry-specific value. For example, here you'll see on the PV array, the solar carport. We see this is a growing interest these days because it's a great way to not only de-risk future purchases, but it's a great marketing and to send that message and display that out there for the masses. So we see a lot of interesting reasons. These are just kind of some of the high level that we see this more common. But this is the case study. I wanted to share this with you. So this is Blasius Countertops. They're just west of the Frankenmuth area. And if you'll see here on the solar array, around it, that's actually crushed quartz. They actually crushed it up. And because this is a bifacial panel, so it actually collects on the backside and produces power. So this is a 258 kilowatt DC solar array. We have 3 50 kilowatt inverters. So this system actually falls into the category 250 kilowatt AC. We maxed out the input on the inverters, really maximizing the potential production from this asset. This system is going to save this business the first year just north of $40,000. The 30-year electric bill savings is going to be $1.7 million. And this is based on some conservative modeling. This company was also, so they had the 30% tax credit and state and federal depreciation, but in addition, because of being in an energy community, they were able to add 10% to their tax credit. So it's a 40% tax credit, the additional depreciations. And then on top of that, they received a REAP grant from the USDA for right around $174,000. This system had a return on investment in 2 years. This was a pretty fun project here. And what's really cool is watching these production values from this bifacial module, from the albedo radiation, from the quartz around. This customer their production is far exceeded any of the proposed expectations from the system. But I'll go ahead and stop it there and share my screen here just a moment. On the screen here, excuse me, my contact information. That is a little QR code that you can scan and it will bring up my contact.
Thanks, Dan.
Thank you.
Well, I have a couple questions, but I wanted to open it up to everybody else first to ask any questions. I didn't see any in the chat, but feel free to raise your hand or just take yourself off mute if you have any questions for Dan.
Hey, Dan, Bob Matler, how are you?
Good. How you doing, Bob?
Doing well, thank you. I was going to ask you, could you point us to any studies, or are you aware of any on the commercial side where the value of the commercial building may have increased? And if not, maybe down the road, if you hear about it or find something, I'd be extremely interested in that. There's just not enough ways to try and sell solar, and every little bit helps. especially on the value add side for developers. They're always looking for that little extra kicker to increase the value of their property. That might be helpful. And then the second question is, do you have any type of good case study from multifamily? I know multifamily is a much bigger challenge because of the separate meters, but I was just wondering whether you've done anything in the multifamily space. That'd be interesting too.
Yeah, we have to go back to your first question. I will do a little bit of research on studies on commercial value of property increase. As I alluded to, there's been a lot more that we've seen from Zillows and residential.
For
But I
sure.
will take a revisit because my guess is we're going to start to see a lot more of this information pop up as like I said, the interest in solar is just starting to compound after the climate legislation last year.
Yep.
And then as for the case study, I will do a look and see if there is a multi-house or multi-family case study. I know we've done work, so if we don't have a case study together, I can happily put that on my to-do list and get that put together for you, Bob, and share with the group at large.
Appreciate that and really interesting information. Thanks for coming on today.
Yeah, my pleasure.
So I had a question. I guess I wasn't aware that there were bifacial solar panels. That was new for me. But I'm just curious, like, so you're saying that system is a 150 kilowatt system. However, because it's bifacial, it exceeds beyond, almost doubles, almost not quite doubles.
So the aggregate system size is 250 kilowatts, 258 kilowatts. Basically, the panels themselves are 415 watts apiece. I'm sorry, 445. But the back side of the panel, that doesn't impact the system sizing. Essentially, what we did is the inverter, a 50 kilowatt inverter that we use can take up to 90 kilowatts of DC power. So that would be 270. And we didn't want to overload them. So we did it about a 258 to really get the max value out of the inverters, but we weren't cooking them so hot that we would ultimately reduce the life expectancy. And this way, this customer still can, they will not have a property tax increase. And when you're in category 2, you're still able to sell that excess generation to the utility. Once we get into category 3, sometimes you can negotiate LMP pricing, but typically it's going to be no value for any export when we get larger than that 150 kilowatt AC.
And Dan, the quick question to Steve Pear. It's my understanding it's very difficult to model the benefit from bifacial panels because there's so many factors involved here. I mean, it's not facing directly the sun. You have, like I said, like the light crushed material that you use underneath it provides more reflection, as you indicated, snow will and that type of thing. But it's very difficult because those conditions can vary hour to hour, day to day, and of course, just by sight and time. So it's something that it provides that extra bonus, I guess I would say, a better probability of meeting, minimum and exceeding that output characteristics of a system. Correct.
You are absolutely correct, Steve. So traditionally, when we utilize bifacial modules, we try not to model it. We do talk about it, letting them know, because I mean, it does also depend, like you said, a lot of site conditions. I mean, a lot of these bifacial manufacturers will boast as much as high teens, almost 20% improvement. We typically, estimate conservatively, maybe half of that or so, knowing that ultimately it can be better under those realistic conditions. Because when we see, when you observe, the sun almost kind of rises in the north, almost northeast, and kind of as it makes its revolution, it kind of sets in the northwest. So we see that it can capture even a little bit on the backside, but it really is that albedo radiation, that reflection. So this just allows them to capture that all year. But yes, you're right. I would say it's difficult to model that without making it, you don't want to make it more, fluff it up and make it more production than it potentially would be. So conservative is key on those.
And then just another comment, this is a ground mount system. Are you seeing a growth in this area, particularly in rural and agricultural, as far as ground mount versus rooftop, or what type of shifts are you seeing?
Yeah, I would say it's a pretty good mix. I'd say with a lot of our projects we do is a ballasted or roof mounted system. Just typically it's because of, footprint of the land, or maybe it's, hey, this part of our property here is slated for future expansion, so we don't want to put it on the ground. But where the areas are that we have that usable ground space, it's much better on the economics at a large scale. And then it also allows, because, hey, these panels are on the ground, we're not flush mounting them. We see that there's active wind, air coming through there. It keeps these panels cooler, which ultimately drives a little bit better voltage or efficiencies.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Dan.
Hey,
My pleasure.
Dan,
Yeah.
Bob again. Can you confirm or comment that the Inflation Reduction Act, when we are putting white reflective roofing on in tandem with solar, that both the roofing and the solar array qualifies for the minimum 30% tax
Correct.
credit under the IRA?
Correct. That is correct. To my knowledge, that is absolutely correct, Bob.
And
That's huge.
exactly. People don't realize that if you have a roof tear off, if you use white reflective and then the bifacial, you're not only going to get a 30% minimum tax credit for not just the solar, but for the roof. But you're also going to get probably a bigger bang for your buck, because if you've got the bifacial, the reflection off the roof is going to add to your juice that you're creating under the solar array. So I wanted Dan to just confirm that, because that was my understanding under the IRA.
Yep.
Good keeps getting better, Bob.
And this is
Hey,
probably
Bob.
the perfect transition into Sam's presentation now, where we're going to be
Yeah.
talking about roofs. So we can go ahead and do that. And sorry, Sam, I didn't mean to interrupt.
And I was going to comment on what Bob said, that kind of add to it, more than just the IRA benefit that you can get there. There are other incentives out there for having solar or going with cool white roofs and adding insulation. If you're in DTE has a cool roof incentive, as well as Consumers Energy. Between DTE and Consumers Energy, they pretty much cover the majority of the state of Michigan for your energy coverage. And most of them have cool roof rebates out there for going back with cool roof systems.
Are those based on a per square foot basis? So many dollars per
Yes.
square foot?
Yeah, so I know Consumers Energy a little bit more intimately because they cover more of the state, but Consumers will give you 2 cents per square foot of cool roof installed.
Well, that could add up.
Yeah.
Yes.
An industrial.
That's big.
Yep. And then and there's some other things. If you add additional insulation there's some more stuff that you get as part of your incentive rebate as well. So definitely, if you're adding a new roofing system, whether you're doing a tear off, you're doing a recover, coming back with a new roofing system, I would definitely consider that. And I know they have significant funds. For example, Consumers Energy last year didn't use all the money that they had set aside for that. And that program for them, I think, runs technically through the end of November. And then they'll announce at the end of November what the incentive program will be for the next year.
With the Consumers Energy Program, is that for Oakland County, or is that Wayne County? How is it? Because Consumers had said over in Grand Rapids that they would do anything in the areas that they were working in.
So that's for any place where Consumers Energy is the one who supplies the electricity and power to that building. So I can't exactly tell you what counties state covers. Detroit area is where it gets tricky, where some cities is Detroit and other cities are.
Right. And that's the thing. Yes. Right.
So I just want to say thank you to Dan for your presentation, and I think now we can transition over to Sam's presentation. Dan, if you wouldn't mind unsharing your screen, and so Sam can share his slides. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you, everybody.
And welcome to the new folks that joined. Feel free to introduce yourself in the chat if you'd like. We're putting questions in the chat, but we're also just opening it up after the presentation. And I think that's it.
All right, well, thank you, Kendall. I'm Sam Tillman. I'm with Duralast Roofing. If you're not familiar with Duralast, Duralast is a commercial roofing manufacturer, actually the only roofing manufacturer headquartered in Michigan. Founded and headquartered here in Saginaw, Michigan. We are the manufacturer of cool white roofing, specializing in PVC roofing and metal roofing for flat and low slope roofing applications. If you're not familiar with us, we do a number of your local school districts. We do a lot of majority of the fast food chain restaurants that you eat at. They like to use our product exclusively. Today on what we're going to start on, we're going to talk a little bit about kind of cool rules for hot planets, to kind of define a little bit what hot planets mean, and several solutions there for your roofs for kind of combating what the hot planet effect is. So what is the hot planet effect? In a way, it says we kind of live in greenhouses, and the atmosphere kind of traps heat in. For me personally, I live in a brick house, and I've had plenty of days where it's hot, sunny all day long, and I step outside in the evening, and that brick is still radiating heat from it that is trapped from the day's sun. Many of the urban areas that we live in have that same effect. Most of our buildings are constructed out of steel, concrete, glass are probably the most common materials that are used. Well, those materials can trap and store heat and then begin to radiate it through the night, kind of creating what we call a heat island effect. It's global change, global climate change is significant enough where the Department of Defense has considered it one of the greatest threats to our national security, because that global change can also increase our natural disasters, whether it's fires like we see over in California, it's hurricanes like we see in Florida, or tornadoes like what we see in the middle of the country. And those things can create havoc on our infrastructure. So being able to reduce the effects of the heat island effect or our impacts on global climate change is highly important to our national security. So what is the heat island effect? Pretty much what the heat island effect is how in urban areas, the temperature can be significantly warmer than in rural areas or even in suburban areas. Because of the materials that our buildings are constructed out of, if you're in downtown Detroit, downtown can be 2-3 degrees hotter than what you may see if you're 30 minutes outside of downtown out in farmland. So one of the things that you can look at here on this page, if you look at, sorry, didn't mean for it to change. If you look at that picture there of Detroit area, you'll see the grayish brownish color area in what will be more of our urban areas. And then it spaces out more as it gets out towards green areas, which will be more of our rural areas. In those areas, they will see significant temperature difference than what they will see in the rural areas. And that's due to the buildings, that's due to our roads and infrastructure. Our roads and infrastructure can trap more heat and also has effects on how our waters run off during rainstorms. And we'll talk about this a little later. So what we're going to talk about a little bit today is some of the things that take place in urban areas to help combat some of it and some of the government regulations that may be involved related to this. So the key areas we're going to talk about is our solutions to urban island effects. We're going to talk about blue roofs, cool roofs, solar system, green roofs, long-term sustainable solutions, gray roofs, and incentives. I promise I wasn't just trying to show I know the colors of the rainbow. These are all actual things. So the first 5 we're going to talk about in depth. Gray roofs is not necessarily a solution to combating urban effect, but it's something that we see in urban areas. Gray roofs pretty much start to talk about the usable rooftops that we like to see. Many of our buildings downtown Detroit and in some of our suburban areas wanted to look at how do they use the space on their rooftop as bars, patios, and places for people to hang out. If you hear the term gray roofs, that's what it's referring to. Many of them are putting paver systems on top and tying it in with several things to be able to take advantage of that space. The one thing I'll tell you, if you're going to look at doing a gray roof or adding a usable roof space, make sure your deck can handle the weight load of the infrastructure needed to make that gray roof, as well as the amount of patrons that's going to be on there. Also look at the roofing assembly to make sure that the roof itself, like your insulation, is not going to be crushed by pavers, or that they can be easily removed if you have a leak so that you can easily find and repair your leak. Incentives and rebates, we're not going to go great into that. I know Dan started to hint to some of the incentives. through the IRA and the 30% incentive there. There are also incentives by DTE and by Consumers Energy. There are also governmental rebates out there if you're adding new solar that can tie in your roofing system with it as well as grants that are out there. Also, something that's really popular nationwide is many urban areas are starting to put in incentives, or the opposite of incentives, tax implications for going with cool roofing systems. So that legislation in that local municipality may say, if you're replacing your roof, you must go back with a cool roof. And if you don't go back with a cool roof or vegetative roof, there will be a tax penalty for not doing so. Or there may be a tax break if you do add those things. How they build that in may vary depending on which urban core area you're doing a roofing system in, but you may want to be mindful of those that are out there. So one of the things we've noticed is that our cities are growing. And with that, that means our cities are growing hotter. You know, I grew up out in Romulus, and I can remember in my neighborhood, there was not blocks on blocks full of houses and new developments. But since then, we've noticed that our population have grown, our downtown areas are growing. You guys can look at all the economic growth we've seen in downtown, Midtown, and Corktown. A new building was put in place at Joe Louis. Another building was put in place on Gratiot. Some of these areas didn't have buildings, were parking lots, and now we're adding new infrastructure. As you go to some of our suburban areas, we've seen a great growth in these cities with houses being put up, more stores and restaurants. Well, all that has an effect. Roofs can make up to about 25 to 30% of a total city's area. With that, it adds to the population of that environment. So one of the solutions when we look at all the new economic growth and development in new buildings is blue roofs. Blue roofs are a newer idea or theology that has been introduced. And what that pretty much is a roof that can retain and store the water from rains. Now, what does it want to do? Some of them are going to retain it and take that water and reintroduce it to use the vegetation of the flowers around it. Or if they have a green roof on the system, that water can be retained and then used to water the roofing system. That will reduce the amount of water that's needed from that building. Because if you were naturally watering your vegetative roof or your landscape around your building using captured rainwater, now you're not using water from our water grid. Also, one of the things it tries to do, one of them is reduce the amount of water going back into our storm systems. Our systems, we've seen plenty of them that have had system overloads. If you guys remember a couple of years ago, there was just an enormous amount of floods in the Detroit area from our rain systems. We had heavy rains and it started to cause freeways to flood, which some of them we saw some really funny things with people riding their jet skis on the freeway. But some of it is the amount of development we've had. When you have new development, you have more buildings, you have more concrete sidewalk roads. The rains water are not seeping back into our environment naturally. They're hitting these concrete paths and now they have to try to run to some level of infrastructure to now go off and be stored or sent out to our rivers and lakes. So a blue roof helps deal with some of these problems by storing rainwater, restricting the speed of runoff water. They have valves that can be installed on the system and storm drains to control the flow of water during heavy rainstorms. The idea of this is to prevent storm pipes from backing up, which causes floods and damage to our buildings, and it also sends untreated water into our rivers and lakes. This water, like I said, can be harvested to go in back into your green roofs. We don't really see it using for toilets or showers here in the US, but I know in Puerto Rico, when I was there, they have cisterns outside a lot of their buildings to be able to capture some of this water that they'll in turn use for things like flushing their toilets or other things. So those are blue roofs. In blue roofs, you'll want to look at what the structure of your building is. You also, if you're doing this, want to ask that roofing system, what the makeup is of their roofing material, to make sure that there's no chemicals in there that may be a part of the runoff, because you don't want to try to capture and it turns out it's going to kill your vegetation and landscape. So now we're going to look at cool roofs. As we're talking about cool roofs, this idea is that you're trying to cool down the roofing system itself, or you're having a material there that will reflect the heat from the sun rays and not heat up your entire building. What this slide here is showing you is the effects of a cool roof, the building material like your walls and even your parking lot versus vegetation. So in this image here, if you look here, you see the rectangle of the building, the white roofing system. If you look at the thermal image above, it comes out green. In here, you got your scale on your left that shows you from purple all the way to white what these colors mean and the hotter the temperature. You'll notice that your parking lot is significantly hotter than your green roofing system. So a highly developed city that has more parking lots will be obviously hotter, because that concrete will get hotter and retain the sun's heat a lot more. But the one thing I definitely want to point out here is noticing just that white roofing system reflecting off the solar rays of the sun is significantly cooler than the metal, which you see on the fascia of the building, as well as the brick beneath. So the goal of a cool roofing system is simply that it won't heat up as much. It will reflect many of the sun's rays, as well as it won't maintain the day's heat as long. So I kind of just told you what cool roofs are, but cool roofs use highly reflective surface to direct sun heat away from the building and into the atmosphere and beyond. So solar heat reflected, a cool roof pretty much is any roofing system that can reflect anywhere from 50 to 70 or more percent of the solar rays away from the building. So your goals of your cool roof are to design and construct a watertight roofing system, design a superior building system. You want to create a healthier environment for occupants and create more comfortable environment for occupants. If you have a warehouse, where I see this a lot, because Duralast, we put cool white roofs on a number of buildings. You may have a building that has a warehouse or has a manufacturing operation that doesn't have temperature control system. They're not pumping AC in there throughout the summer. Going with a cool white roof versus going with a built-up roofing system or a black roofing system, those people on the inside will notice the significant difference on the temperature inside the building by simply going with a cool white roof. We've personally noticed at Duralast that temperature difference can be anywhere from 2 to maybe 10 degrees or sometimes more on the inside of building by simply going with a cool white roof. If you add insulation on top of that, that increases the effect of cooling off the building more, or not heating up as much from the sun in the summer. I started my career in manufacturing, and I remember some of those facilities. We have the doors open, fans blowing, doing everything we can to try to cool that building off. But simply going with the white roof can be a very much inexpensive way of cooling that building some in summer months versus adding in HVAC system and a cooling system to the building. Another benefit or features of a cool white roof is that it can improve the efficiency of your HVAC system. Think of your cell phone, you set it on your dashboard in the middle of the day on an 80-degree day. Your cell phone, most of us will start to tell us it's ready to cut off because it's overheating. Our electronic devices do not perform as well when they're at hotter temperatures. So if you have a cool white roof, it reduces the ambient temperature around your HVAC unit, causing them to operate more efficiently. That also helps increase the lifespan of your HVAC equipment. And then another great benefit of it is your energy bill will decrease. Number one, your building's not going to be as hot. Number two, by reducing the ambient temperature, that air that your HVAC unit is sucking in to try to cool off, to cool your building, is now less. So on a cool white roof, a highly reflective roof, the ambient air temperature is probably only 2 degrees hotter than the temperature of the day. So if it's a 75-degree day, it's only 77 degrees on that roofing surface at your HVAC units. If you had a rock ballasted roofing system or a black roofing system, that temperature can be significantly higher. So on that 75-degree day, you may see 92 degrees, 95 degrees. Your HVAC unit has to turn 95 degrees now back to 70 versus 77 degrees down to 70, significantly reducing the power needed by your HVAC systems. Another thing to consider when we're looking at this with cool white roofs and its effect on your bills is that during the day are peak demand hours for our electricity. So believe it or not, most buildings have more cooling days than they have heating days, and you're cooling your building during a time when energy cost is at its most expensive. So you want to keep this in mind that it can cause you to have a higher energy bill if you're cooling your building off a great deal. The next thing, and Dan just talked to us a lot about solar, so I'm not going to talk the same things he talked about with solar, but here are some of the things that you want to consider if you're looking at adding a solar system to your building as an option for alternative energy. Number one, you want to consider the weight load of the solar system. You want to make sure that your roofing deck can hold the weight of that solar system. On top of that, you want to look at what are the effects of the weight of that solar system onto your roofing system. Many roofing systems are your deck, its insulation, most popular is polyiso, followed by your watertight roofing system. The weight of a solar system can actually crush, or the racking system can crush some of your insulation and damage your insulation, reducing its R value and its effectiveness as insulation. One thing that you can add that helps that is simply adding a hardboard or a cover board over top of your insulation so that it distributes that weight more and it doesn't allow the weight of that solar system to crush your insulation. Next thing to look at is your solar attachment method. Are you going with just a weighted racking system, or are you going with a mounted racking system where it needs to be screwed into the deck? You want to look at what are your solutions for weighting that down or mechanically fasten it so that you keep a watertight roofing system. The other thing to consider is what is the life expectancy of your roof versus the life expectancy of your solar system. Many solar systems are established to run maybe 30 years. So with a 30-year life expectancy, you want to look at a roofing system that can last hopefully 30 years.
Hey, Sam,
Yes.
sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to let you know that we have about 2 or 3 more minutes until 1 o'clock, which some people may be able to stay on after, and that's fine. But I just wanted to give you a quick time check.
Thank you. Yeah, we'll be done by then.
Okay.
Cool. So the effects of the surface temperature, Dan talked about it, going with a highly reflective roofing system. If you use a bifacial solar panel, you can capture that reflected energy and getting more of your solar system. The last thing we'll say about solar system is also you want to make sure you have a roofing system that's easy for maintenance and repair. Just in case you find a leak, then you'll need to be able to easily access that. Your green and vegetative roofing systems are pretty much easily your roofing system that have some type of rooftop garden on top of it. Most of the same things apply from the solar system. You want to consider the weight. How is it mounted? Will there be any effects on your roofing system from it? But also you need to look at water runoff, making sure that the water can escape and easily get to the drains and get off of your roofing system. You don't want to overload the weight of your roofing system from the water. Then leak tracking and repair. If you do have a leak, you want to make sure you have trays or it has it segmented enough where you can take out portions of it to find a leak without having to destruct your entire green roofing system. Long-term sustainable roofing systems, Duralast and DuPont partnered to create what we call Duralife 600. The idea behind it is simply that you have a 50-year roofing system. You know, the goal is that the insulation can all stay in place for 50 years and will still stay at the same level of R value for those 50 years. The idea is just creating a long-term roofing system so that you don't have to tear off and throw insulation into your landfills and that your installation is going to last you a long, long time. So in conclusion, installing a cool roof, reflective roof deflects solar heat from reaching into your building, thus aiding your cooling needs. And that's our time. We finished at 1 o'clock on the dot. I guess any questions from anybody here?
Thank you, Sam. Yeah, if anyone is able to stay on for a few extra minutes or has any questions, feel free to come off mute. And then, yeah, I guess you can also follow up with Sam via email here too. All right.
Do you have any questions?
Well, thank you both, and thanks for answering a couple of those questions in the chat, and appreciate all the information, and these presentations are really helpful. Look for the link to this recording. I'm going to send it out to all of the folks that registered that weren't able to join us today. And I hope everybody has a great weekend. Enjoy. We're supposed to have some nice weather, so enjoy it while we have it. And I'll see some of you guys soon.
Sam, this is Ken Johnson. I just
Oh.
wanted to
Yes.
say real quick, I'll probably be reaching out to you across a couple paths of mine. So I'll probably be reaching out to you in the next couple of weeks or so.
Absolutely. The number on the screen is my cell phone number. Look forward to hearing from you.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.